Back on TYT Sports, Dalton Del Don joining me once again. I'm just making up your name at this point, Dalton. We're going to talk a little bit about the NFL because through 5 weeks in the NFL season, there is only one MVP. And compared to years in the past, we've seen usually a couple of candidates. Last year, this year's Matt Ryan. Last year, Tom Brady and Cam Newton kind of went neck and neck. And through 8 weeks of the season, it seemed like Cam Newton was the only reason the Panthers were winning, even though their defense had a lot to do with it. And Tom Brady was doing things at whatever age he is, 38, 39 years old, that we aren't used to seeing because he's such a great quarterback in general. But this year, here's a quick look at the quarterback, running back, and wide receiver leaders, which is very unfair to the NFL because they almost always give it to the quarterback. But Matt Ryan, his yards per attempt are through the effing roof, which, by the way, does not mean Phillip Rivers is your MVP because he's going to finish second in the MVP. But 12 touchdowns to 2 interceptions, 121.6 quarterback rating. We constantly make fun of the idea of the quarterback rating here at TYT Sports because we don't know what it means. We don't think anybody knows what it means. But the other guys in terms of the quarterback category, like Ben Roethlisberger, again, with that offense, you can imagine he might finish with 45 touchdowns. I wouldn't be surprised. And if the Steelers finish as well as they've been playing, maybe he gets it. If you go to the wide receivers and the running backs, I think we have the running backs next. There's no Adrian Peterson-esque guy outside of, I guess, Ezekiel Elliott and Le'Veon Bell. But Le'Veon Bell might have, shot himself in the foot for the suspension at the beginning of the year, that his numbers might not be close enough. And then lastly, if we get to the wide receivers, I would think Marvin Jones, we're going to pass that one real quick. No offense to Marvin Jones. He's had a great season. But Julio Jones is, 103 yards per game. He's found the end zone a decent amount of times. One of the guys that is actually between 11 and 20 who deserves a lot of credit this year because he is tied for the lead in touchdowns with Brown is Larry Fitzgerald. So Dalton, as the NFL expert talking to me right now because I am not the NFL expert, outside of Matt Ryan, who deserves a ton of credit, is there anybody else that could be the MVP through the first quarter of the NFL season?
It's clearly Matt Ryan. I mean, he has 12 touchdowns, just 2 picks. He has yet to fumble. The 10.4 yards per attempt is highly impressive. Obviously, the next closest, as you saw, was a full 2 yards less. I mean, that is just massive. 3 of the 5 games have come on the road. That win in Oakland suddenly looks more impressive. I mean, Oakland's 4-0 otherwise. I don't know what happened. They lost at home to the Bucs week 1. But everyone has, their poor game. The last 2 weeks, they've beat last year's 2 Super Bowl participants, including in Denver.
That's a good point.
Julio Jones has had a great year, and obviously that one game was historic. But 2 of the last 3 weeks, he's been held to under 30 yards.
That's true.
Year 2 in Kyle Shanahan's system. I'm not saying he's going to keep this up. I certainly didn't see it coming. I'm in 13 fantasy football leagues, which is obviously far too many, and I own 0 shares of Matt Ryan, so I can't claim that. He's been basically the same guy the last 5 years. I mean, a competent, very decent, middle of the pack quarterback. But through the first 5 games of this season, it's inarguable he's been the MVP of the league.
Yeah, one of the major things that my executive producer has been saying for a while is the trade they made with Cleveland. They picked up offensive linemen. Who's Alex Mack?
Alex Mack, the center. Yes. Yeah, one of the best centers in the entire league. Yeah.
They started protecting the guy. And to me, it's like if you want to really give out an MVP award, which this would, by the way, never happen in a million years, he's one of the guys, and so is the entire Cowboys offensive line. I just think it would be a great twist if all the sports writers in the world were just like, you know what? Let's give it to the Cowboys O-line. They're making Dak Prescott and Ezekiel Elliott look possibly, I don't want to discredit them, a lot better than they might actually be, which I was saying yesterday in the studio that I think we should just test it just for fun. Next week, the Cowboys have to start their second-string offensive linemen or their third-stringers. Let's just see what happens. I know, you're punting a game. It would never happen in a million years, but we need a test. We need to know. Because when Elliott goes untouched for 65 yards, that means I could run 65 yards through the line. Probably not. But in the end, a lot of credit has to go to offensive lines. The other MVP, and like wherever you're going to see a defensive player take the all-around MVP, that's why we have the Defensive Player of the Year award in the first place, would be the entirety of the Vikings defense, who are now the outright best defense in the NFL, I would think. Even though like the DVOA rankings have the Philadelphia Eagles really high up there. And outside of turnovers per game, the Seahawks defense in 2016, believe this one or not, again, except for turnovers per game, is like outpacing the 2013 defense in points per game and tackles, sacks, all those stats. So I found that to be interesting too. Like, again, it's Matt Ryan or bust, it seems, right now. I think my dark horse, and it's not even that dark of a horse, is Ben Roethlisberger. Because if he finishes with 45 touchdowns like he's on pace for pretty much, and less than 15 interceptions, with a healthy Le'Veon Bell back in that offense, he could be putting up a terrifying season on a team that could go 12-4, 13-3.
So real quick, let me backtrack the defense. J.J. Watt, actually, if anyone had an argument, he had a couple seasons in the last 5 years
last
where
year.
If anyone ever was to do it, I mean, he was just so much better than the next best defensive player. Mm-hmm. It wasn't even close. But, of course, this award's always going to go to the quarterback. And another one real quick, the Vikings. When I did last see you in Vegas over the summer, my biggest bet I made was the Minnesota under. And
was it really?
I thought that they kind of played over their head last year, due for some aggression, having to play a first-place schedule this year. Not only are they the only undefeated team in the NFL right now, but they lost their starting quarterback a week before the season,
right,
and lost Adrian Peterson.
Right.
So
your bet looked great until week one.
I was slightly wrong on that because this defense is the real deal. They're legit. I have totally 180'd on them. I mean, they look awesome. So I was wrong on that. But Roethlisberger, I'm with you. I'm looking at the odds right now, and he's actually the favorite right now. Matt Ryan has plus 725. Roethlisberger, they have plus 500. So
he's
5
still
to 1.
7.25 to 1 on Matt Ryan. That's still great. Gotta take those odds. Those are great odds.
He's so far ahead. But and the other thing with Roethlisberger, whom I love, he's a big durability risk. He's never thrown more than 32 touchdowns in a season ever in his career. So I mean, you got to love the weapons, and if he does stay healthy, and with Le'Veon Bell, he's such a great receiver, Le'Veon Bell, and Sammy Coates, although he might drop a handful of balls each week, he looks awesome as a deep threat. So I'm with you with Roethlisberger being probably the biggest threat right now. And then as far as odds go, then you have Aaron Rodgers and Brady. I mean, Brady just didn't play the first 4 games, and what hurt him is New England went 3-1. If they went 1-3 and they come back and run the table, that would just be a perfect narrative to vote for Brady. But the problem is they looked so good without him. Although that last game, obviously, that might help him as far as voting. Aaron Rodgers, I don't know what to make of his YPA that's dated back 20 games now or whatever. They had the excuse of Jordy Nelson being out and Randall Cobb being banged up last year, but so far this year, more of the same. It's actually a career low YPA. So I don't know what to make of Rodgers. But another dark horse I would say is Russell Wilson. Mm-hmm. He's at plus 750. He's a guy that typically plays a lot better. I don't know, maybe it's anecdotal, but he plays better in the second half of seasons, including last year. They could finish with the number 1 seed in the conference. Jimmy Graham looks terrific again. So I could see him sneaking in there.
So a couple really good points in there. For one, Russell Wilson's a great one, actually, because I noticed this last year too, and their Super Bowl year, is they get better as the season goes on. It feels like, especially when they start playing their conference and they see him a second time, they tend to be more dominant. If they learn your team, if they've played your team in the past, you got to give Pete Carroll credit for being creative the second time around he plays these guys. And going back to last year's playoffs, I know that game against the Panthers, it was a blowout in the first half. None of those players believed they were going to lose that game, and they were very close to pulling what we thought was an improbable comeback, when in reality no, this team knows how to lock it down. So I'm never going to count out a secondary with those players, especially in such a pass-heavy time in the NFL. Those guys can shut it down, and they've been doing it pretty consistently for the past 3.5, 4 years. So, and also back to the Antonio Brown. I wanted to go to the Pittsburgh Steelers for one more thing, because I was curious if there's odds on the over-under for fines for Antonio Brown in the season. He's at like $46,000 worth. I'm thinking $110,000 seems fair. About 2.5 more fines for sexually suggestive celebrations.
Yeah, I don't know if you've seen the Key and Peele sketch, but he's literally just taking it from them, a sketch where he's doing those thrusts, and the guy says, you can do 2 but not 3, and then he does the third one, and they throw the flag, and it's just hilarious that Antonio Brown is doing that. But what weapons Roethlisberger has. That forget the 34-3 loss. Again, every team has, like we just said, the Falcons lost every team. The Bucs. Everyone has their one throwaway game. This Steelers team is extremely dangerous, and I hope they can stay healthy, because I'd love to see what the damage they can do in the playoffs.
Absolutely. Again, like you said, it's a throwaway game. Every team will occasionally go in with a bad game plan, and that happens. And guess what? It happened to Bill Belichick. His game plan didn't work. So it doesn't make it, oh, Belichick's overrated. No, it's just very simple that, like, that game plan was not right that was against the Bills. They lost 16-0, right? It was a barn burner. It was almost as exciting as the Monday Night Football game between the Bucs and the Panthers, the 1-4 Carolina Panthers. I love reading through the Reddit threads, the post-game thread, and they had yesterday, somebody summed it up by saying, having the kicker do the post-game interview is what sums up this Monday Night Football game. Second-round pick on a kicker. All right,
a kicker who missed 2 field goals in the game, by the way. That was your interview. A kicker that missed 2 field goals in the game.
Yeah, exactly. And like somebody made a good point though. Also, I forgot who I was reading it on, and I think it might have been CBS Sports. But they had they were saying they were showing like Adam Vinatieri and Sebastian Janikowski's like first year in the season, and like they had struggles. Like again, I give Dirk Cutter a lot of respect and the Bucs GM for not just cutting this guy after 5 weeks. If he missed that game winner, they might have. But it seemed like throughout that game, they kept saying, if we're going to take the commentators' words for it, that he was their option. It wasn't like they were going to go out and cut him immediately. They're going to stick with him for a couple of years. Again, a lot of talk for a kicker. Seriously. Honestly.
Right, well, think about if the team traded up in the second round and drafted a defensive tackle. You'd have to be pretty bad to be cut 5 games into your career. But I know it's different with kickers because they'd have to come up with a phantom injury or something to put them on IR because that would be a big admission of defeat. Trading up in the second round and cutting said player just 5 games into their career, that'd be pretty brutal.
I think the Seminoles could use Aguayo back. I mean, it's all because of him. They look lost without their kicker. But all right, guys, comment below in terms of who you guys think is the MVP of the 2016-2017 NFL season. Some candidates out there that we thought would always be in the conversation, but through 5 weeks, you can't throw Aaron Rodgers in there. And that's one of the ones we always say would be a guy to do it. But honestly, with 11 games left to play for a lot of these teams, some 12 depending on the bye, you can't ever count any of those guys out in the first place. Right now, it's Matt Ryan. There's no other conversation to have, or the entire Vikings defense. So like, favorite, subscribe to the channel. You can check out Dalton Del Don on Yahoo Sports, LIss's podcast. I guess it's Chris and Dalton's podcast. I'm going to call it Dalton Del Don's podcast featuring LIss, the East Coast offense. I'll leave that in the description box below. Everything else in the description box below. We'll see you next time.